Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka the Zaniac on the floor, and this video we're breaking down Loki.
We're all gonna die! Oh, hey, nice to meet you. We're all gonna die!
Season 2 episode 2 has just dropped and it's packed with Easter eggs, hidden details and big reveals for the future. Throughout this video we're going to be going through it scene by scene to talk about everything in it, all the things you missed, yes you, and our theories for episode 3. Heavy spoilers ahead, and if you enjoy the breakdown then please smash the like button and make sure you subscribe for breakdowns every week. With out of the way, a huge thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Loki.
Don't overthink it.
Now we begin in jolly London back in 1977. This is at the premiere of X5's Zaniac, who he learns became a big film star. 1977 was a massive year for movies, and this was of course when Star Wars dropped. At that point it was the biggest movie of all time, with blockbusters becoming a major thing after the release of Jaws. That happened 2 years prior, and we then saw an influx of films that revolutionized cinema. To the left on the newsstand we can see two defunct papers, with The Messenger and Inquirer both going out of business. At least I think. I tried googling it and I couldn't find them, so we're putting facts down like the truth, and if you don't like it mate, to be fair, there's probably much better breakdowns out there. Now, Loki instantly suspects that Sylvie isn't here because he believes that the location's too safe.
It doesn't feel right.
I know, but why?
It's too safe.
Okay.
It's not a war zone, it's not an apocalypse, it's not her style.
Okay.
In season 1, she was of course hiding out at apocalypses because changing things wouldn't really make a difference. This was shown when Loki visited Pompeii just before the volcano erupted and wiped everything out. Doing this meant that nothing at these points really mattered, as it would all be erased before it could make an impact. However, as we see, Sylvie's creating a life for herself, and doing this while off in a branched timeline. Now as Loki and Mobius walk towards the cinema, we can catch a Kingo poster on the wall. As we learned in Eternals, he's created a film dynasty in which he becomes a big actor and then pretends to be their son. Now as we get to the premiere, we see a poster for the movie which actually has a lot going on with it. X5 is going under the name Brad Wolf, who was the alter ego of Zaniac in the comics. That had Brad growing up in a neglectful household, but he channeled this negativity into becoming an actor. Starring as Zaniac, this was a big monster movie that saw him donning costumes like the classic Universal films. Things like The Wolfman and Frankenstein, they become legendary movies, and Brad was expecting the same stardom from this. However, when he was in costume about to film a scene, an explosion caused him to mutate into Zaniac and become the character. Acting out the movie's script in real life, he ended up kidnapping women and carrying out mass murders whilst also being possessed by a demon. Zaniac was stopped by Thor, and after being subdued, he was then arrested. Now we discover that the demonic entity had basically taken over, and this was controlling him and killing all those people. Upon Wolf's death, this burst forth from his body, and the TV actually had to go back in time and stop it. Now this isn't really in line with that, and instead X5's just playing the part without the other stuff involved. Man's popularity is rising through the roof though, and we even see in the crowd people holding up signs to marry them. Last week there was a lot of talk about how the TVA had taken away their lives, and there's the temptation to go out there and live one. This is something that Mobius shuts down later on when he gets asked about his jet ski lifestyle. Now as we learn, X5 was sent out undercover, but in the end he was tempted with having a life.
Come on, Mobius! You're gonna ruin my life here! Your life here?
Making something for himself, he's now seen as a superstar. He's rumoured to be hooking up with Bridget Bardot, a former model from the time who's also starred in a lot of movies. X5 is probably a bit of a narcissist, so all the stuff he's doing now makes a lot of sense. Man even painted X and 5 on his gloves, showing that he wanted to stand out more than anyone else. Mobius then says,
Will there be a Zaniac 2? A sequel for the fans?
in the comics, we of course know they never got to make one, and due to what happens here, we know that won't be the case either. We then get the line,
No, I used to work with this guy.
which may be riffing on this.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Now X5 plays along at first, pretending he's glad to see them, but he then rushes out, which leads into a big chase. Forgot to say, but I love Loki's 70s style tux, and outside we see B-15 looking snazzy too. Grabbing his temp pad, this leads into a big chase, with Loki going through Strand Lane, which is an important place in London. This was the centre point for theatre and musical halls during the 19th century, and it still retains some of these, so it makes sense why the premiere's here. X5 manages to use a time twister to get himself out of there, which are items we've seen in the series before. Loki ends up creating an illusion that there's a crowd of people, and we get a hint of this being magic due to the amount of people changing. When X5 first runs around the corner, there is a smaller crowd, whereas when he moves into it, way more pop up. Loki also duplicates himself, which is a move that he did during the first Avengers for crowd control. Growing his horns in the shadows, these of course belong to his helmet, and it sort of gives the impression that he's a kind of devil. I have a theory that Loki will end up taking over the position of He Who Remains, which is something I think the series has been spelling out to us. The opening shot had him running in front of the statue, and he also referred to the character as the devil.
You came to kill the devil. Maybe he was.
Loki clearly has his darker side to him too, which I think highlights that he should take over. He knows that the war is coming, and though he thinks people should get free will, he did agree with what He Who Remains was doing.
War, and it's on its way. And maybe it's true. Everything he was doing, the pruning, it was about preventing more of him. There was no simple choice. There was no other way.
With it comes a cost, and he might be the only one who knows that, so in the end, I think he'll take over. This is something that happened in the comics too, and during the young Loki book, he discovered the older version of him was ruling over it all. Now the comics and live action stuff is never one for one, but yet just something to think about when going over the series. Now from here we cut to the title sequence, and huge shoutouts to Ryan Airy last week for going over what this scene signifies. He pointed out that almost all the letters come from other films that Loki is featured in, with there being the typeface for Thor, Avengers, Dark World, Ragnarok, Endgame and so on. The letters signify that we're dealing with a number of different Lokis, but it's all black and white in this to show they're still Loki. Now if you're enjoying the breakdown and want to support the channel, we've got some Loki inspired merch just below on the shelf at the bottom of the video. We also have an Ahsoka themed one that's going to get vaulted soon, a little theory time one, so yeah, check them out if you enjoy the videos. Now back at the TVA, they look over X5's tempad a little closer and see that it's been modified. Taking it to OB, we catch him creating a way to fix the Loom, which I think might lead into some things happening next time. I know some of you don't like when we discuss trailers early in the video though, so I'll save that for the end in case you want to duck out. Giving them the official handbook, this is something he also threw to Loki last week, and we learned that he wrote it himself. He created all the TVA gadgets too, and I actually feel like Obi may be a bigger power in the show. As we saw last time, he never got his memory wiped, and this is why he remembered Mobius, but Mobius didn't remember him. Because he invented everything, that also means he invented the tempad, which is the key to time travel. Someone who could do this would be extremely important to Kang, and we may even find out he had his hand in the chair from Quantumania. I feel like he may be integral to the operation of the TVA, to the point that Kang couldn't afford to wipe his memory. Wiping his memory would remove all of his knowledge, and therefore he was kept in this state. Thus he just had to be shuffled out the way so he could fix stuff, but was never involved in the main things. When you think about it, even stuff sent to him is done directly through funnels, and this is in order to avoid any interaction. He just keeps working away, doesn't sleep, and even the name Ouroboros means a snake eating its own tail, which is a cycle that's constantly going on. This could be seen as a self-destructive cycle, which may be represented in OB and also the TVA. We can also catch a little mini alligator on his desk, which could be a nod to one of the Loki variants. Up with KC, we can see a post-woman in the background with this idea of them coming from the truck last week. We hear there's lots of theories about what's going on with Ravonna, and also get it confirmed that Miss Minutes is down. As we know though, she likely abandoned the TVA, and though we discover that Renslayer deleted all the evidence on her tempad, they can track the last message. During this scene, we also see Mobius' desk, which makes a return from earlier in the series. This is where Loki first probably talked with Miss Minutes, and that actually happened in Season 1, Episode 2. She was able to dodge out the way, and Loki wondered whether she was a hologram or a recording that knew the future. Clearly, she knew the way time was supposed to play out though, which was mirrored in He Who Remains, who was able to dodge Sylvie's attacks. Now they learned Miss Minutes was the one who was working with Renslayer, which we saw playing out during the Season 1 finale. When we first cut to Ravonna during the 7-minute mark of that episode, we could also catch that her tempad was downloading things on the organization.
But I'm downloading the files you need now.
This isn't what I asked for.
I know, but he thinks this'll be more useful.
I think Ravonna then travelled out of the place that Victor Timely's located at, which we'll probably see later on in the season. Taking a shine to the tempad, Casey starts to study it, and we see as the interrogation starts off with X5. He knows their tactics though, so it does prove to be more than difficult. Now, I love the way the wall is orange, and the floor panelling is the same colour as the prison uniform. gives such an awesome colour style to the scene, and throughout these episodes, the way they use colour is really well thought out. X5 then keeps correcting them that he's called Brad, and this shows he's really became attached to his life. He then rips into Loki about how he's now a reformed villain, but all he ever does is make things worse. Bringing up his mother, Loki inadvertently caused her death in Thor the Dark World, though this version hadn't experienced that yet. However, he did see it play out on the holo projector in episode 1, so was aware of what happens with her.
You're a villain. You're good at it.
This kind of pushes Loki into bringing out his darker side, which we see him leaning into more later on in the episode. There's definitely this idea of both him and X5 playing up their dark sides and going after what they want in the end. Might be a reach here, but early on at the premiere, we could see the tagline for the Zaniac poster saying, "No one can escape his terrible craving for blood." This is something I feel thematically runs throughout the episode, with Zaniac even being a character that sort of reflects Loki. Zaniac was someone that wanted to be a hero, but they gave into their dark side due to the demon that was inside of them. Loki has this darker side too, and though he's trying to be a hero, he has this other side that's constantly pulling him back. X5 very much is also a reflection of Loki as well, and in a lot of ways he's sort of, let's say, the less charming side of his personality. X5 is selfish and out for his own ends, which is also something that Loki was after too. He put his own feelings above the TVA, and wants the fame, acceptance, and notoriety that comes with it. This is something that Loki was after too, with him going against his family in Asgard to achieve his own thing. Either way, both ended up in a jumpsuit, but they were still desperate to kind of claw their way back. Now against the walls, we also see these pipes and hoses leading into other areas of the TVA, but these create linear looking structures hanging off the sets. You might have noticed throughout the episode that there's lots of pipes and lines going off into other things, which I sort of think thematically creates the idea of timelines. Huge shout out to our guy MT who noticed this last week after pointing out the funnels above Obi's head somewhat resembles the timelines and the temporal loom. These pipes are all getting collected into one place, which then goes to Obi who fixes it. Looking at the show as a whole, these strands are all connecting together on the time loom, which Obi's pulling together and then also fixing. Again, I feel like he may be way more important than we know, and this series might even end up being about him in the same way that the first one was more about Sylvie. Now Mobius says,
Brad. Brad who? That's showbiz.
And even promises to return him to the timeline so he can continue being a star. X5 points out the fallacy in the TVA and asks who he really is on the timeline. Planning the idea in his head, I do think that we will eventually see Mobius's. I'll talk about this in the trailer section part of the video though, but he clearly touches on a nerve which makes him punch him. Mobius has lost it so much he even questions who's following who, and we watch as they calm down with some key lime pie. There's not anyone here who serves it, and due to the name being Automat, I think this is just created and cloned. The pies themselves could even signify the variants and how they're all kinda similar but not exactly alike. Again, going into the set design we have here, everything's either orange or lime green colour. Whether it's the crust, the ceiling, the clock or the floors, it's all sort of divided up into these two tones. This somewhat ties into Loki himself, with his colours also being shades of these two. Also looking at the clock hanging from the roof, there's not actually any way to tell what the time is. There's several hands all just pointing out randomly, with there not really being any time in the TVA. Loki opens up about his anger and talks about how he invaded New York and then tried to use the Mind Stone on Tony. He admits he lost it and tried to kill Tony by throwing him out the window, which both happened during the Avengers. Also, to this version of Loki, that happened like a week ago, with him escaping during Endgame and then going to the TVA. Man then got to He Who Remains within a couple of days, and I think to him the Avengers was probably just last week. Better times it was, and both Marvel and real life. Now, they have a heart-to-heart about Mobius and the life he was supposed to live, saying that this is in fact his. We get it cleared up that they now know they were kidnapped variants that were drafted into this much in the same way Loki was in Season 1. I think what Loki will do as a whole is show us the creation of the TVA and its fall, which we've already seen due to He Who Remains. I'm guessing Victor Timely will show its beginnings, and then we'll spend most of our time here when the organisation started to crumble. Cutting to the end of time, I feel like the castle's the last known headquarters, without Rock being all that exists of the organisation. MT last week did a big video breaking down all the connections to black holes, which appeared in the credits and the lines of dialogue. He theorized that we actually see the TVA located in its own black hole, which will exist at the end of time until there's nothing left. Now Mobius is clearly scared that if he discovers he had a good life, he'd want to go back to it, and somebody get that man a jet ski. Either way, they realize that X5 found Sylvie, but that he didn't alert her so she could keep living her life. I don't think that Sylvie would recognize him either, as this wasn't someone she ran into in Season 1. I know most of her life was spent running from the TVA, but at least they kept it consistent, and also X5, he's kind of following her footsteps by getting his own life. Now we watch as Obi goes to the temporal loom, which is where we see it firing up and getting more unstable. Anyway, that takes it for your time. Just doing the one. So I think that eventually this is gonna overload and potentially explode, causing bigger fractures in the multiverse. I think that this is what Sylvie was up to last week, with her probably travelling back with Loki. When she was climbing out of the elevator, she said,
There you are.
and therefore I think a future Loki and Sylvie are teamed up to return to this moment when the temporal loom hits critical mass. Looking at the environment when this is happening, the walls and lights were going haywire, which I believe probably links to this. I think this season will be about trying to fix the temporal loom, which is why they have to get help from Victor Timely. All these scenes show its and I think the series will focus around fixing this to save the multiverse. The temporal aura is also said to be invalid, so they have to find a way to lock this whole thing down. Now Loki and Mobius decide to go back to X5, which is when they decide to play things the hard way. It basically turns into Loki locking them in together and busting out a crushing temporal doorway to get what he wants. We actually had a little nod to this last week, as you could catch a poster warning not to get stuck inside the doorway. Loki also says he's wrote a script of his own.
I wrote a little script of my own.
Which goes beyond just Brad being an actor. As we saw with He Who Remains, he had a stack of paper showing everything everyone was going to say, but this only went up to a certain point. In the end, both Lokis went off in different directions and are now creating a script of their own. Loki fully plays into his villainous side, which I think he may need if he's gonna lead the TVA. That's kinda how I think things are gonna go, with Kang's empire literally crumbling around us in the opening scene of episode 1. I think this scene works really well too, with him literally boxing X5 in order to get answers. Watching the box get smaller and smaller as the music ramps up, it just builds up so well, and in the end it cranks up the tension so much. Now as X5 falls, we can also see some scars on his arms. Shoutouts to Eric at New Rockstars for pointing out last week that this actually lined up with his armour, which we could see when he was standing with his gloves around his neck. These scars lined up with a scratch across his armour, showing that they were all likely created in the same blow. Now from here we cut to B-15 and Casey entering the temporal loom. I think it was Cosmic Wonder who pointed out first that this looked like the daughter Cerebro from X-Men, with it possibly being a precursor to the MCU vision. Ki-Hu Kwan, yeah, he just absolutely kills it here.
We're all gonna die. Oh, hey, nice to meet you. We're all gonna die.
And Casey starts fanboying over OB writing the TVA handbook. If you go to the credits, we actually get a close-up of this book and can see the little bit that says it's written by Ouroboros. Again, it shows how important he is to the organisation, but we also have to question why he was completely shoved out the way. MT was saying that he might actually be the villain of this series, with him orchestrating the chaos that we see playing out. Man was pushed out the way for centuries, and this may even be him out for revenge. He also brought up how he could actually be Mr. Griffin, who, in case you don't know, is a Kang variant. Griffin is a shapeshifter that can transform how he looks, and he's also had a nod given to him in the series before. During the opening of episode 5, we could see the Avengers Tower had the name Kang on it, which was something that Mr. Griffin owned. Potentially, Obi could be this, and this is why he knows so much about time travel. Obi suggests that they either get Miss Minutes to return or he finds He Who Remains, probably teasing what's gonna happen next week. Both Kang and Miss Minutes were the ones that took his work and used it as a way to take over everything. Thus getting back to them, that might be the endgame that eventually leads to him being the big bad. Now from here we cut to a branch timeline in 1982, which is where we saw Sylvie in the post-credit scene last week. They show that she's not been there a full year, and they do a great job of keeping things in line with McDonald's in the 80s. The sign says over 40 billion served, whereas these days it's over 300 billion. Her co-worker also said,
Well, you can try our new Chicken McNuggets, and we have a Big Mac.
Shoutouts to Eric Voss for pointing out these were first introduced in select stores during 1981, which builds off the back of them being new. We also get a line with Sylvie's co-worker, where I feel like it shows she's aware of everything.
Hey, can you refill the straw dispenser when you get a sec?
Already done it.
This is kind of like how He Remains knew what was coming before it did, or it might be a reach. Also, I want to apologise again for having another cold. I keep having these colds, yeah. We've got twins, they're in nursery at the moment, and every week they're either bringing home bad reports or viruses, which is nice, but I'm pushing it on the viewers. You get to hear the brunt of it in my snotty, nasally voice. But either way, this has made her a star employee, as she already has 5 of them on her name badge. This scene was actually released by McDonald's earlier in the year, as they're doing a Loki tie-in alongside the show. X5 is also super nervous too.
Let's just get it to go when we get up and we get out of here. Is this a setup?
Which we later learn is due to Dox's plans. I'll explain how this works later on, because you might be wondering how certain points in timelines can be wiped out, yet still have existed at some point. Now on her lunch break, Loki lays it all out and talks about how he saw her future at the TVA. We see how she's starting to get more in line with how she looked in the elevator, as she's now got her green coat and hairstyle from that. You can also catch her wearing her normal boots though, showing that she's still got some of the old Sylvie in there. We can also see she's got an eye symbol for her earring, pronounced out terribly, but this actually means that it symbolises life. Now Sylvie found a new life here, and she just wants to be left alone and be able to live it. Now Loki talks to her about our theory time, and he says that he feels the same way too. However, Sylvie says,
"Is it? Really? Because that sounds a lot like the future's already been written. And we both know that it hasn't, not anymore."
And this is something they discuss a lot in the Terminator franchise. That wrestles back and forth between fate and free will, but as we know, Sylvie will end up there, which to me shows that someone else is still in charge. Again, I personally think Loki will take over, which was foreshadowed during the opening shot of the season. Now X5 desperately wants to get back to the sacred timeline, as that's all that's safe and he's well aware of what's about to happen. Clearly jittery, Mobius plays to his ego about Zaniac, which he passes off as elevated horror. Man's making cinema, I heard, some of that A24-ish, and it's from 1977, so bloody get Martin Scorsese on the phone. Nah, but the 70s was of course a golden age for it, with The Exorcist releasing in the decade. Now X5 going wild in the car park makes her enchant him, and we see Dox's plan. I love how Sylvie reveals her costume as well, which her changing her clothes from the McDonald's uniform steps closer to the future version. Entering a giant hall, we see as they're mass pruning the branches and wiping out trillions of lives. Now Dox is still clearly indoctrinated to the idea of what the TVA was set up for, with her describing it as a mission.
Our mission is compromised. Set up what you can.
She also had war medals on with the timekeeper's heads, showing she dedicated her life to this entire facade. Speaks to me how some will still continue on with their life even when they're shown it's wrong, and highlights the blind faith the TVA have in their leaders. This idea of faith was highlighted in the murals last week, with there being several images that went towards the idea of religion. The timekeepers had their hands pressed together like a prayer, and those on the ground were praising them like gods.
And then the timekeepers came along and saved us all.
We really start to get the idea of the cost here though, with the TVA staring at the timeline dissipating, destroying countless lives. Now you might be wondering how this works when people will exist in moments before they were pruned. I think it happens the same way as incursions do in the comics, which are basically when two worlds crash into each other. There are ways to avert this by destroying the other world or finding a way to pass through the Earth. Still though, hitting this Earth wipes out everything in it, both forwards and backwards in time as well, just like how pruning a timeline does. And that's how people like Old Man Logan can exist in the future, with his past being a branch. Now say they travelled to 2010 and pruned it from there, it would still continue to wipe things out in the Old Man Logan future. How this works is that it's like a ripple effect in which the explosion starts off from the impact point and then travels forwards and backwards through time. Now say someone pruned the branch we're in now. Technically, you from yesterday would be wiped out along with you from today. However, this would happen in a ripple effect, with you from last month getting wiped out first, then last week and so on. Makes you realise how little time you have left to hit the thumbs up button, but that's how I think timeline wiping out works. Now some timelines survive, so we can still have multiversal stories, but large sections of the multiverse are completely wiped out. Howard the Duck movie, gone. Mobius, fingers crossed for that one. And I'm hoping that the X-Men timeline survives, because I really like those movies. However, I feel like this ending kind of echoes the one from episode 2 in season 1, in which Sylvie did something similar. She ended up bombing the TVA in order to try and save countless timelines, whereas here it's reversed to do the opposite effect. Either way, Renslayer's tempad is finally tracked, and Sylvie returns to the branch 1982. Here we catch her listening to Cosmic Blues by Janis Joplin, which itself has a deeper meaning. Performed at Woodstock in 1968, the song starts off with the lyric, "Time keeps moving." This of course reflects what's going on here, but beyond that it's got another layer to it. The song's about trying to stay optimistic, even if reality constantly lets you down. Sylvie has tried to carve out her own life here, but she inevitably has ended up coming up short. Though she says to Jack she thinks she'll be in tomorrow, that likely isn't the case, as we close out with her starting up the He Who Remains device. This is where the power derives from, and we theorized last season that it was linked in with the device Tony Stark created as the Quantum Realm GPS. That was something that wrapped around the front of the hand, which is something that this also does. Guessing next week, she may jump across time, and we could potentially end up seeing the Victor Timely episode. Also, her promise to Jack, it might stay true, because technically she can time travel and could still show up at work tomorrow, even after she's gone off and done a big adventure. Lots of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff. And also, huge shout-outs to Scarlet Witch News on Twitter for spotting in the credits. You can see a post note that says Hex Moment. There's also a diagram looking like the symbol on the Darkhold, so good catch, because I completely missed that. Now, as for my thoughts on this entry, I felt it was a slight step down from last week, with it mainly being set up and reuniting the characters. Stuff like that I always feel is kind of by the numbers, because, they need to meet back up and they sort of draw it out. So where they really need to perform is in the execution, which I think again was done brilliantly throughout. Tom Hiddleston really got to come into his own here, and he balanced the torturing scenes with the more personal ones brilliantly. Going from the pie scene to the torture one worked really well and helped keep the dynamics of the entire show up. From there jumping to McDonald's and then onto the big pruning scene, it just kept it working and made the episode way better than it could have been if it just fallen into the trap of being like, yeah, we're gonna meet up, let's go see them, oh yeah, let's go meet up. I still don't think it quite hit the heights of last week, but I'd still say this was a solid entry, even if it wasn't perfect. I love the handheld camera feeling that the episodes all have, and again, the direction and set design is completely stellar. Guessing things are going to ramp up next week anyway, and yeah, let me know your thoughts before we get into the trailer. Now this bit coming up could contain spoilers, and though we're breaking down the public trailer, it may be stuff you just don't want to know. Do me a favor though, on the way out, hit the like, and sorry, I keep begging that, but it's been a tough day getting this recorded because my voice is, I've just kept losing it, so thanks, I'd appreciate it. Now, but you guys who stayed through that, I have a feeling that Mobius will end up back at his jet ski place, as we saw in the trailer how Loki arrived at the location that sells them. I'm guessing Mobius might return back to his life and go there, which is when Loki will go and try and pull him out. Did seem like he was time slipping again, so maybe something happens with the Loom that causes this to expand. Now I think next time that they're gonna track down Victor Timely, which will also take them to where Ravonna Renslayer is. This looks like it takes place at the Chicago Fair, and remember, it was used as the post-credit scene for Quantumania. Now on stage we could catch Victor Timely showing off the temporal Loom, and thus I think they'll need him to fix the one in the present. Victor Timely is a variant of Kang who travelled back to the past after suffering several defeats. In the past he used his knowledge of the future to create incredible inventions, and he built a town of Timely up around him. Kang's whole MO is that he wants to rule, and no matter what point he travels to in time, that's all he wants to do. I think they might even grab this one from the stage and take it back with them, and then swap everything out so that the entire timeline's saved. This was potentially what Loki saw Sylvie going to do, and it's possible that Timely goes to the TVA with them. There was a shot in one of the promos where we could see a model of the suit Mobius wore in episode 1, with Jonathan Majors clearly being at the end of it. So I think they're possibly bringing it all back to the TVA, where they'll try and replace the Loom and fix the entire thing. I think that would be a good way to take things if Victor Timely was a good guy, and it would show how you never know which version of Kang you're gonna get. Sometimes you'll bump into a villain, sometimes they'll be good guys, and we might even see some turn from good to bad. I do like the way the show is going though, and you never know what's coming around the corner. Sure, there are these brief things because of where time travel goes, but we will see as we get into it. Now please drop a like on the video, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes such a long way to helping us out. Again, we have our merch store just below the video, and if you want to pick up that Loki inspired t-shirt or the Ahsoka one before we take it offline, then yeah, definitely head over there right after this. With that out of the way, huge thank you as always for sitting through the video. Really appreciate it that you've watched. I don't know why you're watching at this point, but yeah, hopefully I see you next time, and you take care of yourself, mate. Take care. Peace.